to questions from you all. Please raise your hand if you have a question, and the runner will come to you with the microphone.
How do you deal with all the danger that you deal with in your world on a regular basis?
Who's the question to?
Open up to anyone.
Anyone, I guess, could answer.
Well, the dangers that I face are negligible compared to the dangers that the journalist featured in the film had faced. I've done my best to deal with perceived threats by listening to colleagues and whatnot in places where things were perhaps bound to be a little sketchy, and one gathers information and tries to get on with the job and to be as prudent as possible. Certainly trying to do things as much as possible. Practices that I've observed are trying as much as possible to do things in daylight, and trying to make sure that people both in the country who were aware of what I was doing and outside the country were aware of where I was. This is certainly true in some places that I've worked in. South Africa at the time I was there, the West Bank, and in Israel the times that I was there during, close to the times of intifadas. But as I say, women like Arzu, who was trying to do her job in Turkey until she was forced out of it, have much more raw experiences of danger than I do as a Canadian, whether working here or abroad.
Me? Oh, okay. My own situation is far away from the situation we saw just with the last movie. To me, the fear came after the walk. I mean, at the very beginning, I start to collect videos on social networks about police brutality, and I did the job. I think that job we have to be done, and after that, the problems comes. But at the very beginning, I didn't feel any fear or nothing. 1 or 2 weeks after, yes, but it's too late. It starts.
Arzu, do you want to say something?
Can you repeat the question for me, please? Because I couldn't hear all the things.
What threats did you feel like while filming the movie?
Could you tell us about the fear that you deal with?
First of all, I want to say something for the first question. And when you work the non-democratic country every day, every hour, every minute, you have in a dangerous situation. It can be happen anytime. And then, but when you started the journalism, you have to pay a cost for that, and then you accept at the beginning, and then, for example, the most dangerous situation, losing the family, right? I have a come face to face to losing my 7 months baby, and then for the next question, and there is nothing now that scare me, everything is happened already, and I think I am very strong than I was, when I live in the Turkey. Also, these festivals, also in my profession, I was working more than 10 years as a court reporter and writing the news about the social justice and unjust situation or victims, innocent people, and some kind of stories. And I found myself as a victim. Also, I know that I am innocent, but they put my name, the killing list, terrorist list, everything. I never be committed or joined that kind of stuff. But what can I do for
Thank you.
Thank you, Arzu.
I think this gentleman in the back there, I think was next. Yeah, there you go.
My question is for David Dufresne. David, the images of the violence in the various manifestations was extremely moving and very powerful. But I have one question about it because, well, it was police brutality that we saw most often. There was one scene, there was a group of organized people with a power tool breaking into a bank's ATM. That was very clear. You could see the sparks were flying, and it was looting as far as I could interpret it. Did you find that people had infiltrated the people who were in the manifestation to try and use the chaos to commit crime?
Il y a des gens qui ont profité de la situation pour commettre des crimes.
You mean demonstrators? Yes, you mean that? Yeah. Yes, there is some, but the movie is not about them. It's about how democracy could be with its own people. And in all democracy police, there is two things very important. One is the necessary use of force and the proportional use of force. That's the key points of the movie. And after that, if you think only as criminals about looters, about demonstrators, about you forget one thing is pure political things that could mean. I mean, it could be criminal, but not only criminal. It could be a way to make politics. You can say I don't agree with that, but TV shows show only the criminal part and never talk about the political part of that kind of gesture, that kind of attitude. It's very difficult to me to explain you in English. I hope I'm clear.
You are.
Thank you.
I understand you, but it's...
So in the movie, you see some people, a very symbolic moment was the attack of Le Fouquet's. Le Fouquet's is a very, very famous cafe in Champs-Élysées in Paris, where Nicolas Sarkozy and some people do some meeting and everything. You see that in the movie. But it's not only destruction. I mean, this destruction means something.
And what is that?
What?
What does the destruction of Fouquet's mean to you?
After that, during 3 weeks, the Fouquet's was like a bunker, and they did a very great renovation. So the political things was not very, but it's like a joke, but not only. I mean, to me, that's the reason why sometimes I shoot the same place after the moment. Exactly for the Fouquet's, I did it. Okay, so you saw the Fouquet's destroying, and you saw it renovated. You can't do that with the corpse. you cannot renovate an arm or something. The main difference for me is there. Building could be renovated, not the corpse. Bodies, yes.
Could you comment on our freedom convert?
Can I get in on this gentleman's question?
Sure.
Yeah. So thank you for your question. One of the, I think, the great things about David's movie is that it documents trends that have corollaries in a lot of Western countries and here in Canada. And so I wanted to make a couple of observations. The first one is protests like these are frequently composed of a variety of different actors with different political motivations. And what we've seen in Canada, and indeed across Europe, is this group called the Black Brigade, which are devoted anarchists. And they're often the ones that lead the charge in terms of the property destruction. And so I think that's pursuant to David's observation, that they are actually going against property. And David is trying to draw a sharp distinction, I think, between property, which can be renovated, replaced, that kind of thing, and human beings, which can't be. And so they're trying to call attention to the fact that those things, property matters, are more important than human matters to the police, right? The other thing I think that's important as a cautionary note is it's very common for the police themselves to infiltrate protests and plant in their midst agent provocateurs who do these kinds of things. This has happened
relevant to the freedom
this would be relevant to the Freedom Convoy too. Yeah, it absolutely would. They had informants. The police had informants on the inside. I'm not sure that a case has been made for them having agent provocateurs, but I can give you some significant Canadian case. It happened in Montebello, and the Quebec Provincial Police put in agent provocateurs, and those agent provocateurs threw stones at the police. They were dressed up as regular protesters. They threw stones at the police. They were identified by other protests who were part of the movement, who noticed that they were wearing Sûreté to Quebec issued boots. And they said, these are not protesters, these are police. The police then pulled them behind the lines, and 5 days later, the Quebec Provincial Police issued an apology. So it's dangerous to draw an inference that it's always the protesters. I'm sorry, sir?
One of the other panelists talk to this because you're not making a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think they're both saying it made sense to them, so
Yeah, okay.
thanks. And
Somebody else should comment on it.
just some decorum, like when I'm answering a question, I think I should be allowed to finish.
Go for it.
Thanks. I yield to you, David, or you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have more people who are, yeah?
Hi, I have a question specifically for Arzu, but if any of the other panelists would like to respond, I'd appreciate that as well. My question was regarding Arzu and your views on Canadian reporting, and coming from like a liberal democracy, do you find that we are objective? Do you find that we have bias in comparison to where you've been reporting from and your experiences reporting as a journalist?
Yeah, it's a very good question, thank you. In my country, our agenda change every 10 minutes, you know. You have no chance to create a big news because nothing is the big news. Over there's a lot of corruption, gun trade, lots of things, you know. Especially Turkey is the so important country, not about the, you know, the education or something like that. The geographically, it is the root of the cartels, you know. Because the Turkey is the bridge and between Asia and Europe, right? And then they have to use the Turkey as a drug trade, gun trade, cosmetic, whatever you want, human trade also for the smugglers. And we write very quickly the news because you have no time, and also we follow what we write, like a series, and we work as a file for all of them. And we have a profession, court reporter, police reporter, parliamentary reporter. In Canada, I think they are not there is no similarity how we work, how we write, and everything is very different. I find the Canadian journalism like an academic work. They write the news like academicians and academic leader, but honestly, we doesn't care. We just find the evidence and then put it, just a call to check, to be objective in everything. They are so professional, but I found that some things, for example, as a journalist, I never have a connection with the government, also any parties, and not take a picture with them and something like that. But I just realized that a couple of Canadian journalism press you to be grateful Canadian government, something like that. Some kind of Canada propagandist, I love the Canada because of its people. You can find every color, every culture, every voice in here. But it is not about it is beautiful, not about the state provide. It is beautiful because the people are beautiful in here. Also, there is respectful. And the other stuff, there is no opportunities for refugee journalists in here. For example, when I write an article, they try to look an editor. It takes 5 days. I forget what I wrote, right, in 5 days. Who can remember? And also, I have a patient when I write the news, but I'm gonna lose it after 5 days, and then they're asking me what you mean, that this sentence, something like that. I try to remember what I wrote. And the news, nothing like, the books. Do you give the energy, also the wish to people write more work, or to help, the quickly, also the responding very quickly. Also, there's also barrier in here, language barrier, experience, maybe white supremacy. I never be, come face to face, but a couple of my friends told them because of your accent, something like that. I'm a journalist. I wrote the news on the newspaper. I'm not the TV journalist, But I don't need that. People don't need how I speak, but they have to see how I write. But I didn't find any opportunity. But it's give me a lot of things and teach me a lot of things also. And now my writing style was changed. Now I started to write an academician in Canada. Also, I believe Canada has a couple of problems, and then it will be the corruption, something like that. But I never read that kind of news in here,
Thank you, Arzu.
You are very welcome.
First, thank you all for making both of those films, and thank you, for being in those films. I hope my question makes a little bit of sense. David, your movie around the monopoly of violence and kind of what makes violence legitimate, I'm from the United States, and so where we have media is so concentrated, and you get kind of such similar perspectives around what violence looks like at a protest. So, how do we move past kind of, documentaries into making kind of the ideas around what does violence look like, what does, especially kind of like when police can infiltrate protests and create that type of violence. Like, how do we move to people having an understanding and a kind of like an understanding of what the violence looks like, so that we can actually have a real conversation around it in the mainstream.
I'm sorry, I really don't know. I do my best, but I really don't know. In France, we made more than 300 debates like this one, with a lot of people, and what the police did to the Yellow Vest movement was, for a lot of people in France, like a revelation, because mostly from the Yellow Vest movement, people were for the police before. You know, they used to watch a TV magazine, and for them, police was nice, was okay, and they understood at that time there is a problem. So right now in France there is a lot of debate about the police and about the control of the police. That's the main question right now, and I think about it's difficult to talk about police because of a lot of things, but it's possible to talk about the control of the police. Who controls the police? Who runs the police? But more, I don't know. I'm so sorry.
No. I mean, I don't know.
Can I?
Yeah.
Actually, I think, David, in your introductory remarks, you talked about surveillance. And it seems to me that surveillance, this idea of filming from below and on par with, is part of the social response that's starting to come forward to negate that kind of capacity for violence and to call attention to the question of whether it is truly legitimate. The use of that violence is legitimate, is justified. And one of the things that I really appreciated both about David's approach to that issue and about the fact that he interviewed the other side. Remember, he interviewed this police officer at a certain point, and folks will remember, because I heard chuckles going across the audience. That police officer was saying, yeah, that's justified. Meanwhile, all of us were looking at that thinking, no, that's not justified, right? So I think one of the things that surveillance does is it puts it out to a public jury, which I think is a really important thing. But both of these films, I think, call to our attention the conditions of possibility for dissent in democratic society and how these policing practices and these journalistic closures on journalism anyway are starting to close the limits of possibility for dissent in important ways that they're calling in the States, they're calling this democratic backsliding, which means we're sliding away from a democracy and into an autocratic, authoritarian, totalitarian kind of system, right? So I think some of this is starting to be exposed and slowly being challenged. And I guess the best example here in Vancouver is that there's been this pressure for the police to start wearing those body-worn cameras. Have people heard about this or seen this, right? And the idea is that this will create a higher level of accountability. I'm not sure that it actually delivers, because if you know the Tyree Nichols case, they were wearing the body cameras and they beat him badly anyway.
Thank you.
So you don't think, just film in it?
Hello, thank you for both the movies. Very watchable, very entertaining, very informative. Question about creative process for each director. James, the three journalists you were interviewing, they were speaking English, and Arzu could speak to this as well. This is a question from a retired English teacher. So I did notice they're struggling with language. There were people learning English. And I wondered if there'd ever been a discussion between you and the interviewees about, having dialogues with them or letting them speak in their own languages and then, having subtitles translating. So just whether that had come up, and I'm not trying to insinuate that that's what you should have done, it's just a question of genuine curiosity about whether that had been discussed and if a decision had been made, what the options were. Then for David, question about, I'm going to confess my ignorance of the yellow vest movement. I don't know what it is. I don't know what they were angry about. I don't know who their leaders were. The whole film, I didn't get a single slogan. For example, like Black Lives Matter would be a slogan. No slogan. So I have no sense of the political content of the yellow vest movement. Now that's my ignorance. So my question to you is that the way the film is because you presupposed an audience already familiar with the movement? Or is it because you wanted the viewer to feel not to be worried about that and to focus instead on the images and the wonderfully selected dialogues?
Number 2. Thank you. The Yellow Vest movement was without any leaders. And that was a brand new thing in France, no leaders. So it was very, very difficult for Emmanuel Macron and the states to answer, because there were no representative, no leaders. And sometimes when a guy or a woman comes on the TV show, they get backlash right now. So there were no leaders. At the very beginning, the slogan, the revendication, the demands was about tax on gasoline, on gas. Sorry. It was sometimes a pretty right movement at the very, very beginning. But don't forget one thing: every revolution comes with protest from taxes, things like that. And after that, left people come with the Yellow Vest movement, and at the end it was a very strange, very huge movement, very long, more than 1 year of demonstration every week, even in France. That's crazy. But for the movie, the question was not the Yellow Vest movement. This is the reason why I think the movie traveled all over the world, because it's more about the state, the police, the democracy, and in a way it doesn't matter the demands from the Yellow Vest.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Arzu, do you have something to say?
No, maybe James.
Okay.
We talked about it a great deal. I talked about it with the journalists, and certainly there are moments in the film when Luis speaks Spanish and Abdurrahman speaks Arabic, and Arzu speaks Turkish. And those were moments where they wanted to express themselves in those languages, but they also insisted that they wanted as much as possible to speak English. And myself and my editor, Deborah Palloway, we agreed that part of the message of the film should be one of inclusion and of the effort that so-called mainstream average Canadians need to make to accommodate people who speak with accents. So, and each of you are, entitled to come up with your own impression as to how it works on a film, but I think that most people whose first language is English, if they're watching the film carefully, do understand what each of Luis and Arzu and Abdurrahman say, and they get more of an emotional truth from what they're saying to hear them struggle to say it in English. And in terms of my own media politics, I resent subtitles when they're not necessary. I think the effort is necessary. You know, I disagree, for example, with my last days at the CBC, the moment anybody spoke in an accent, they would say, there has to be subtitles. And I would say, fuck that, there doesn't need to be subtitles. I mean, we live in a multicultural society. We hear different people all the time with different accents. Make an effort, understand each other. So that, you know, I'm the director, I got to make that call. And maybe it was right or maybe it was wrong. But that was my thinking, and correct me if I'm wrong, Arzu, but we did discuss these matters off and on over 3 years. Would you agree?
Yes, yes. You did great job because, you know, I didn't care how I speak. I believe that I can give you message, you know, what I want. And then people saw my face also, you know, I believe that my energy going to them, you know, and you accept helping us and then being our voice. This is the important, and also to show them, you know, we are also, this is the challenge for us. It is important. So using a translator sometimes doesn't work, you know. I am waiting, and at that times, maybe I lost my emotions, but I want to say, waiting how they translate something like that. But speaking in a natural way, it's better.
Thank you, Arzu.
Hi. Thank you very much to all of your work towards, I think, justice and truth. My question was towards David Dufresne, but I would be very interested to hear about any of the presenters' ideas as well. I was thinking about the relationship between states, the police and the media recently. And both documentaries touch on this point very largely. But a friend from France back home told me not that long ago that Alliance, so the very strong police union, walked in a manifestation against the recent reforms with other protesters, which sounded very interesting to us because they usually beat up protesters. So I was quite surprised. And another example, so in the downtown east side here, which is a poor neighborhood with a lot of people living on the streets, lately the mayor released that they would send more money for the police to be more involved in the neighborhood, quoting fears of gun violence. But although there's been for sure some people living in a neighborhood that were found with guns, the only gun deaths in the neighborhood were from police. Police killed 3 people in the downtown east side in the past year, but the media's only report about the fact that police found people with guns and thus they need to be more police. So if you had any thoughts on that, I'd be very interested to hear. Thanks.
Yes, you're right. Last week there were some demonstrations against a project from Macron, and we found some police syndicates as a demonstrator. So I was very happy to interview them, telling them how many people do you come today, because sometimes they always count less people than there is for real. But as they were demonstrators, they said they were more honest about the people. And the problem, the very, 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 very big issue with police syndicates in France is where there are more and more alt-right. And this is the problem of the world society, French world society. It becomes more and more far-right. And police goes more and more far-right. That means a lot of discrimination, a lot of racism in some neighborhoods, as you said. But to me, one of the problems with the police is the media with the police. And this is the reason why the movie I made, there is a short sequence about the TV, a news TV show, and about the what they say is absolutely insane and absolutely it's not real, but they are making the opinion, they are making the thinking of the society. To me, that's a very great problem, very big problem. I call it a journalisme de préfecture. It could be said a journalism of police. And what happened in the United States, in Canada, in Europe, is right now everybody can film and show how the police practice, how the police could be. And you don't have to need authorization to broadcast this image. Before the social media, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, there is no way to broadcast your image except the national news TV. So there is a kind of change, but it's a struggle, a battle, very, very hard battle.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you once again, David, James, Arzu. Thank you all for being here.